Once you've debriefed your candidate, you need to debrief your client. After the first interview, the client won't know whether they're going to hire the candidate, but by this point, they'll know whether they like them and would like to proceed with the process. Start by telling the client that you've spoken to the candidate and that you'd like to get their feedback on how the interview went. Look for positive responses and adapt these questions accordingly. As an example, I would ask some of the following questions. How did the interview go? What did you think of the candidate? How did they compare to your expectations? How long did the interview last? Who else met with the candidate? What did you think of the candidate's personality? How do you think they'll fit into your team? How do they compare with other candidates you've seen? How do they compare to the original brief you gave me? Are they the right person for the role? If they are, ask why. If they're not, find out why. And bear this in mind for the next candidate you present to the client. How would you like to proceed with this? If there are any specific points from your debrief with the candidate worth mentioning to your client, now's the time to raise them. It could help confirm their view on the interview and encourage them to organise a second interview. Keep the client up to date with what the candidate has in the pipeline. If they're going to conduct a second interview, ask when it will be and how long do they think it will last. If the client doesn't want to progress to a second interview, understand why. And I would say something like, what do I need to do differently? Has the original brief changed? If the brief has changed and you feel you've qualified the candidate correctly, revisit Module 2 and take the spec again. Before the second and third interviews, I've always found it extremely helpful to refer back to Module 2 and ask your client the following questions. Who will my candidate meet during the interview? And what are the questions they're likely to be asked in the second and third interviews? And what specifically are you looking for from the ideal candidate? The person they're going to be meeting, what's their interview style? And what stands out most for them in an interview? This will help you to fully prepare your candidate for the next stage of interviews. If you arrange a second interview and the client likes the candidate, this is a good opportunity to confirm your client's position. You can either apply gentle pressure to encourage them to make an offer by the third interview, or if the client has doubts, use the questions to iron out any issues along the way. Start by asking some initial questions after the first interview, such as, what did you think of the candidate this time? How did they compare to your expectations? In your opinion, are they the right person for this role? And if they are, ask why. But if they're not, find out why. And bear this in mind for the next candidate you present to the client. Ask the client, how did he close the interview? If your client is interested in the candidate, you can start by closing them on an offer. I would ask, on what criteria will you be making your choice? Are you considering making them an offer? When will your final decision be made on the candidate? Based on your client's response, you will know whether you can close them for an offer. Tell them what you think your candidate is prepared to accept and confirm if that offer works. It's helpful to get the client's figure slightly higher than the candidate's. This may provide some much needed room for negotiation in case your candidates raise their expectations during the offer process. For example, if you've been closing the candidate at $47,000 throughout the process, manage the client's expectations and get them closer to around $50,000. I would say something like, as you know, they're currently on $47,000 a year, and I think we can secure them for around 50,000. Does this figure work for you? In an ideal situation, you want the candidate to be happy with 47,000 and the client to be around 50,000. So you can accept the offer on behalf of the candidate, and the candidate will be really happy in getting this increase. This provides a win-win situation for both your client and your candidate. If the client isn't as enthusiastic as they were after the first interview, understand why. It's likely that your candidate will also be of interest to other clients you're working with. I found it helpful to gauge a client's interest by asking them whether they'd like me to hold off from organising interviews between the candidate and some of my other clients who've shown an interest in meeting them. If they're keen on this candidate, they won't want any other clients to meet them. After the third interview, start by asking the same questions again, such as, what did you think of the candidate this time round? Do you still think they'll fit into your team? Are they the right person for the role? If they are, ask why. But if they're not, find out why. And bear this in mind for the next candidate you present to the client. If the client's feedback has been positive up to this point, I would ask if I can make the candidate the offer at 50,000 as previously discussed. If they need more time to make a decision, understand why. If you're not working exclusively on the brief, the client might be considering other candidates that other recruiters have presented to them. You need to understand your client's reasons so that you can iron out any potential hiccups. Don't be afraid to get an answer you don't want to hear. Depending on what the objection or hold-up might be, you could still be in a position to influence their decision to secure an offer. Once you've worked with the client to overcome their reservations, arrange a phone call for the following day to confirm the offer. My key tips to take away from this module are: debrief your client straight after debriefing your candidate. Consistent contact is imperative. It's during this stage that most deals fall through. Always deliver constructive feedback to the client if there is any. Use your candidate debrief to test your client's feelings towards the candidate. This can help iron out any potential issues. Ask open-ended questions to elicit spontaneous responses. Listen to what both the candidate and the client are telling you. Don't try and convince yourself they're committed to the process if they're telling you otherwise.